As the final demo in this module, let's take a look at the ASP.NET Zero Power Tools in action. Let me show you how we can work with the ASP.NET Zero Power Tools, and keep in mind that some of the things I will be showing may actually be a little bit complex, but we'll get to them in the next module in a lot more depth. So don't panic if you cannot follow along with everything I'm doing at this point. It's just to give you an idea of the ASP.NET Zero Power Tools. So to get started, you go to the Visual Studio Marketplace, and there you'll need to search for ASP.NET Zero Power Tools. You can then click here on the download button, and that will give you the Visual Studio installer file. Simply double click and it will install the extension into Visual Studio. Please keep in mind that it's best not to have Visual Studio running when installing the extension. So let me now show you the Power Tools in action. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the download page, and from here I'm going to download the latest version based on this Angular version and .NET Core version, and then I click here on Generate Demo Project. I've already used the Acme Phonebook project name, which is what we will be doing in the next module for the entire manual build of the application as well. I have already done that, and I've extracted that into this Phonebook demo folder here. In here we find two projects. Again, we'll dive deeper into these projects in much more detail in the next module. But for now, I'm going to go to ASP.NET Core, and in here I'll select the web solution. Now, using the ASP.NET Zero Power Tools, a lot of code will get generated, and a migration will also be executed for me. In fact, it will also run an update database so that everything is basically already in place. Now, in order for an update database to work, we need to go to the web host project and go to the app settings.json. And in here, I'll need to make sure that I have my connection string set correctly. So I'm going to update that here because I'm running here on localDB. And I'm going to name the database Power Tools Test Demo, and the rest is basically default. Save that. Let's do a quick build to make sure that everything already works and that the packages have been restored. That all seems to be perfect. All right, now we're going to use the Power Tools. So we go to Tools, ASP.NET Zero, and then we click here on Create Entity. Here we can now create our entity. The namespace for our application is going to be Phonebook. The entity I want to create in this demo is called Person. It's possible to give a different name for the plural of the entity name. In this case, I'll leave it as is, but I could name this People. The database name I'll leave as default Persons. It's going to be a base entity, and the primary key is going to be an integer. I also ask to do a migration as well as an update database, so the database will be automatically brought in sync. I'm also going to ask to generate a UI already. That's going to be in the Angular part of the application. I'm going to create a user interface with some extra options here, and I also want to put this in the root menu. I also enable the multi-tenancy. Then I'm going to go to the Properties tab, and I'm going to add a couple of properties for my entity. I'm going to start with a first name string. I can filter on that. I can select to show or hide this in the UI. And I can also specify some attributes. For example, this value should always be between 1 and 100 characters. Alternatively, I could also add a regular expression here, and I'm going to make this one required. I'm going to do pretty much the same for the last name. I'm also going to set that the length should be between 1 and 100 characters. Also make that required. I can also add a different type of property. For example, I'm going to add a date time here, the birth date. And finally, I'm going to add an email. And I could specify here also a regex to verify in the server-side code that this is effectively an email address. I'm going to skip that for now. And I'm going to click this button, Generate. This is going to do a lot of things for me. It's going to generate a lot of files, and it's going to also try to update the database. Let's try that. So it's now running the migration. Now it's going to update the database. The migrations have been applied, and also the client-side components and HTML code has been generated. We can now close this, and now we can safely run the backend. And now I can see the Swagger UI for the backend. Now in the folder here, we also had the Angular code. Let's open this folder in VS Code. So I'm going to come here to Visual Studio, and I'm going to click Open Folder, and I'll navigate to my Angular code. in the terminal window, make sure that we install all the required packages by running npm I. Once that is ready, there's one thing that, in my case, doesn't happen automatically. It might change, of course, in the next version, but make sure that with the API running, you navigate to the nswag directory by typing cd nswag, and in there call refresh.bat. This will make sure that the client-side code is up to date with what is available on the server side. With that all done, we can now call npm start. The application will now get compiled and we'll be able to browse it using localhost 4200. So let's go to the browser and take a look at the running application. We'll need to log in with the default, which is admin123qwe, since this is of course a new application. Now I see here in the menu persons. This was generated by the ASP.NET Zero Power Tools. I can create a new person. As you see, based on the type, it will show me different UI to enter the data. Click on Save. This person now appears here. I can edit that person. I can filter the list of persons. When I type GI, it will find it, but when I type something completely different, it will not show here. You also see that we have the ability to page the result as well as do an export to Excel. So all of this code, both client and server side, has been generated for me. And it is plain code. You can go ahead in Visual Studio as well as Visual Studio Code, start editing this code.